Good afternoon again, and welcome again to the Hanover Hydrogen Fuel Cell Batteries Group Exhibit. My name is Robin, and this afternoon I will be speaking with Mr. Ross Bailey, who's the Vice Chairman of the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, as well as CEO of Greenlight Innovation. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So first of all, I know that you've been around the fuel cells industry for a minute or two. So can you tell us a little bit about your background before we get into the association?
Sure, happy to. So yeah, again, my name is Ross Bailey, CEO of Greenlight Innovation. I've been in the fuel cell industry now for going on 25 years, I guess. And I don't want to date myself here, but I started at Ballard way back out of engineering school as a test engineer.
In Vancouver, Canada? In
Vancouver, Canada, that's right. And then worked there for about 10 years and went over to Hydrogenics and worked with Hydrogenics for 2 or 3 years. And then the opportunity came up to take over Greenlight, so we did that. And I've been with Greenlight now for 9 years.
So that's you probably have a few companies here that you've worked with or clients? Or?
Yeah, it seems like I've either worked with for or buy things from pretty well everybody here, so.
You're well known. Can you tell us about the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, about their goals and maybe their mandate as well?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll just talk a bit about the association. So I'm, as Robin said, Vice Chair of the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. It's a member-driven company. It's got approximately 40 members. Those members represent about $200 million in revenue within Canada, and employ about 2,000 people with good high-paying technology jobs. So the association was, as it's structured now, was created in 2009 with the merger of 2 other associations. That's Hydrogen and Fuel Cells Canada and the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association of Canada from a previous association. So its role, its purpose in life is really to help in the commercialization of fuel cells and hydrogen technologies, and do a lot of government. They do government relations. They administer and provide funding through government programs such as GOA and a number of other programs, and then obviously outreach such as education and then member programs. There's some training and other educational functions that happen.
Like research with the local universities and so on?
Yeah, they coordinate things like that as well, yeah.
And how is the government, the Canadian government, supporting the association, the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association?
Sure. So the association lobbies all levels of government for funding and for education and to promote fuel cell activities. So I can tell you that the new Liberal government in Canada has made a large commitment to clean energy technologies in its most recent budget. It's increased IRAP funding, which IRAP is the industrial research funding, by $100 million. And that's not just specific to fuel cell, but that's part of it. Our company gets funded by IRAP as well, as do many of the other fuel cell companies.
And that's at federal level?
That's at the federal level. At the provincial level, the province of British Columbia, where we're from, is funding, they're putting $10.6 million into hydrogen infrastructure. So they're funding two hydrogen stations. They're also providing a $6,000 per vehicle subsidy on electric fuel cell vehicles. So that's a really great initiative to get cars on the road. In Quebec, the Quebec province is, they are pushing electric vehicles, and they've mandated that 15% of the vehicles sold in Quebec will need to be zero emission. So those types of initiatives, it doesn't have to be monetary. They can also support industries like ours with regulation.
So this is more, well, I guess BC or Vancouver more specifically being a bit of a hub for hydrogen and fuel cell. I don't know if it gets more support or it gets more action.
Yeah, well, Canada and our province of BC has a long history in fuel cells, and I think that you could safely say that Vancouver was kind of the cradle of the fuel cell industry. It goes back to the early 1980s when Ballard received some government funding to test fuel cells from patents that had expired. So they were awarded a government contract. And at the time, Ballard was a battery company.
Sorry, the time it was a what?
A battery company.
A battery company,
yeah.
Correct. I heard that there's a few stations going up in
That's true.
Place in Canada?
Yeah, so right now we have a fleet of Hyundai vehicles in Vancouver in British Columbia. We've got about a dozen cars, but there's only one fueling station, and that's at PowerTech Labs in Surrey, which is outside Vancouver. So there's a station underway right now in Vancouver, close to the airport, that's going to be operational this year. And then the other station is being funded by the province of British Columbia. Hasn't been tendered yet, but that will be going out, and that will be installed in 2018. And then Hydrogenics was just awarded a couple of stations going into the Toronto area, the Greater Toronto area. So that's exciting that they're going to have some hydrogen infrastructure out there. And we're trying to attract the car OEMs to put some of these hydrogen vehicles in. And we're hoping to increase the number of Hyundai vehicles in the Vancouver area.
So Hyundai being one.
I'm going to put my name in for one.
Fantastic.
Once they open that station in Vancouver, yeah.
What are the challenges that the hydrogen fuel cell industry face in Canada, in your opinion?
Sure. So I would say a lack of a strategy, of a roadmap to work towards legislating zero-emission vehicles. So that's a big one, because an industry like ours is not going to happen without legislation, without clean air legislation, and it's not going to happen on its own merits at this time, just because of the cost implications of it. So there's that, and then also related is the lack of hydrogen infrastructure for vehicles. So you've heard people talk about the chicken and the egg, but I say there isn't a chicken and the egg. That's not the problem. The problem is we need the infrastructure first. So the infrastructure has to come in, and once the infrastructure is in, then the car companies can put vehicles in, because they're not going to commit to vehicles if there's no infrastructure, and it takes time. So the governments need to step up, legislate. They need to incent the car companies, and they need to provide money for infrastructure. And then the industry will just follow.
So, in speaking of, well, we spoke of the challenges now, what are sort of opportunities that you see in relation to that?
Well, I can tell you, I think, as we talked about, I think we're seeing infrastructure going in. There's quite a bit of interest now. But let me tell you about what some of the member companies are doing. So
that's fantastic.
I'm just going to refer to
success stories.
Yeah, refer to some of my notes here, and I'll tell you some of our members that are exhibiting here today. I'll go through a few things, a few highlights. Ballard Power Systems recently announced their partnership in China with Broad Ocean. They're going to be manufacturing. Broad Ocean's going to be manufacturing Ballard stacks, and then they'll be integrated into buses in China. So that's going on. That's a large contract. Ballard's also partway through a $100 million R&D program with both the Volkswagen Group and Audi to develop automotive fuel cells. AFCC, that's the Automotive Fuel Cell Cooperation, based in Burnaby. That's a joint venture between Daimler and Ford. That's actually the largest automotive R&D center in Canada, in Vancouver. Who would have thought of that? Hydrogenics, we heard burned up here earlier, leading developer of fuel cell power modules and electrolyzers. So they've recently announced a contract to award installation for 2 refueling systems. And they've also been selected by Sunline Transit to provide fuel cell modules and refueling infrastructure. Loop Energy, a startup in Vancouver, they're developing a 50 kilowatt range extender for heavy duty applications. A company called H-Tech in Vancouver, they're a supplier of hydrogen and hydrogen infrastructure products. They're putting in a station in California right now. It's just about completed, being commissioned as we speak, and they're putting in the one in Vancouver right now. D-Point Technologies, they're here at the Canadian booth showing their humidifier technology. It's a gas-to-gas energy exchanger. And there's this little company called Greenlight Innovation right over there.
Yes, indeed.
So we're
the CEO of.
a leading supplier of test equipment and manufacturing equipment. We sell globally, and when we announced recently our partnership with AVL and our joint development of a automotive engine test system for drivetrain development, and that's targeting the car companies. Other companies that are members of the association include PowerTech Labs, which does equipment or component testing, and they make hydrogen infrastructure products. And then both CSA and Intertech are represented here this week, and there are certification labs that also support the industry. So those are just some of the activities that are going on in hydrogen and fuel cells within Canada right now.
Fantastic, thank you. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of government support.
Yeah.
And I hear that there's been a lot of buzz about a conference that's happening in Vancouver next year, HFC 2017.
Yeah, there seems to be. Yes. So this is going to be a business summit in Vancouver, hosted by the association, June 5th and 6th. And it's going to be small. It's going to be a couple of hundred people, and it's really a business summit to talk about commercialization and the rollout of hydrogen and fuel cells. So it's going to sell out. So if anyone is interested, I recommend that you enroll early, and you can get some information at our booth or at the association's booth.
Yep. The booth for the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association is D64/1, just that corner, right next to Greenlight Innovation, and that's basically all any information that anything else that you want to share with us today, apart from your amazing conference coming up?
Yes. No, just come by the booth, and from whatever countries you're from, I would say support your local industry associations and work on, as much as you can, on government advocacy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you to Mr. Ross Bailey, again, Vice Chair at the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, as well as the CEO at Greenlight Innovation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Perfect. Thanks, Lad. Up next, I should mention again, the booth number is D64, just behind. And up next, we have my colleague Mona. We'll be talking to Mr. Arnaud Ever, who is the founder of the group exhibit in 1995. And the title, the phrase that he coined, "Go to where the market is." And the title is "How to Unveil Unknown Business Potentials for Hydrogen Fuel Cells and Batteries." Thank you very much.